All right, call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum. Hello, everybody. The first item on the agenda is hearing from the members of the audience. And our first person is Ms. Balabuska-Ray. I know. Thank you, Pam. Before you start, so we do invite members of the public to speak. This has nothing to do with you. I ask that everybody comply with policy 206, which basically means no negative comments about employees, board members. Please keep your presentation to 3 minutes or less. I do note that we have 9 potential speakers on crumb rubber. So if you have heard your issue covered, it would be nice if you came up and just said, so-and-so has already covered it, and just try to be briefer, that's all. I'm not asking you not to come up, but at least be briefer. Thank you. And then grab the microphone.
Hello. Can you hear? Is it on? Okay, thank you. Thanks for having all of us this evening. We appreciate being a part of the process. At your last school board meeting in April, you voted to move forward with 4 artificial turf athletic fields that include crumb rubber. This despite the hundreds of concerned members of the community asking you to postpone the decision until federal studies come out later this year regarding the safety of crumb rubber. We, your constituents, have been hard at work continuing to do our research on the matter from many angles. It has come to my attention that there have been lawsuits brought against Field Turf, the company you plan to use for our fields. These lawsuits raise a red flag and should concern you, our elected officials, who are entrusted with our safety and with our money. In California, Field Turf and a supplier were charged in 2008 with being in violation of California's Proposition 65 law by not including warning labels on products containing chemicals known to cause cancer or birth defects. Testing on Field Turf's products showed that they contained more than 10 times the state and federal guidelines for children's products. As a part of the agreement to settle charges, Field Turf had to reduce the amount of lead contained in their products. The lead was added to synthetic grass to keep its color bright. They had to pay about $500,000 in civil penalties. They agreed to pay for the testing of its products installed before November 2003 in the public facilities and offer discounts to replace turf found to have high lead content. They did not agree to replace products bought by consumers. On March 11, 2016, a representative from Field Turf admitted, yes, there is lead in our product when testifying to the Ways and Means Committee of the Maryland General Assembly. In 2014, the Arlington School District in Texas reached a settlement on a $1 million lawsuit against Field Turf. The lawsuit stated that turf fields the company supplied in 2007 proved to be defective and failed as early as 2010. The company admitted it in writing and failed and refused to repair. The district previously paid $1.5 million for the installation of the old fields. After the settlement, the district had to pay $280,000 for a high-grade replacement. In March of 2016, it was reported that 2 public school districts and 1 private school in California purchased Field Turf playing surfaces in 2009. In each case, the school systems were promised that they would last 8 to 10 years and were issued an 8-year warranty. Each school system said before the end of 8 years the field started failing. As early as 2014, they saw breaking, splitting, thinning of fibers, fiber breakage, and pile layover. Field Turf refused to replace the fields with newer surfaces. They allege that Field Turf knew the systems were faulty because Field Turf filed suit against their own fiber supplier, which was settled in 2014. The school systems are seeking a combined $15.7 million in damages. Field Turf is fighting the claims. In Ontario, a high school district is currently suing Field Turf for the cost of original installation and replacement of their fields. They are seeking $9.1 million plus civil penalties. They allege that their fields started to deteriorate within 4 years. The superintendent of schools said the product was defective and we had to remove the turf for performance and safety. They want the manufacturer to start charging an upgrade fee when districts demand a replacement for failing turf installed before 2011. Field Turf offered to replace their fields with the same faulty material or upgrade the fields for $175,000 each. The district opted to replace the turf with a product from another company for $1.8 million.
Excuse me.
I
Could
have
you-
one more.
Excellent. Thank you.
The past and continuing behavior of Field Turf toward their customers, and by extension the children who use their products, should be noted. Is it appropriate to award a major contract to a company with questionable practices? I hope that we can count on the board to seriously consider our concerns and vote to stop moving forward today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is David Frankel. Mr. Frankel.
Hi, my name's Dave. Dave, can you hear me? Dave Frankel, Edina resident with 3 children in the Edina school system. Emailed last night all the school board members and the superintendent information that I'm sure you're hopefully aware of from the Consumer Product Safety Commission and the EPA. I probably shouldn't have to repeat this, but just to put it on record, this is a quote from the Consumer Product Safety Commission website. You have it in your email. This was as of February 2016. Today's launch of a coordinated effort among the leading federal health and safety agencies to research the safety of recycled tire crumb is a significant first step to providing parents with the answers they deserve. EPA, CDC, and CPSC are working together to end the uncertainty regarding whether it is safe for our children to play on fields and playgrounds that use crumb rubber, and provide guidance that is clear, practical, and reliable. From the EPA website, and this is information you should take to heart because there's been a lot of comments about the safety or lack of safety of synthetic rubber infill. Limited studies, this is a quote, limited studies have not shown an elevated health risk from playing on fields with tire crumb, but the existing studies do not comprehensively evaluate the concerns about health risk from exposure to tire crumb. These federal agencies are putting forth this study that was just mentioned by the end of this year under duress from the U.S. Congress. All over the United States, groups like this in Edina are coming forward and asking for a review, which these agencies are now doing. In other words, given what the EPA and the Consumer Product Safety Commission have said, the slate is clean. There is no such thing as a study that shows crumb rubber is safe, nor is there a study that says it's dangerous. That is why all these federal agencies are moving forward with a comprehensive study. There's multiple scenarios that could come out of this. One could be it's inconclusive, but another scenario could be, and the EPA has done this before with Freon, and Edina has been affected with this at our hockey rink. Freon had to be removed from our hockey facility as a refrigerant because it's banned by EPA by 2020. But the EPA could come out and say this tire infill has to be removed from all fields by X date. They have the power. The EPA is the final say on this. And the last point given is I'd like to see the school board hold off until that study is completed. Any comments that have been made or are going to be made about the safety of crumb rubber just are not true. The EPA has said that. Like I said, the slate is clean. One last comment. Suburban, a well-known school district county in suburban Washington, D.C., Montgomery County, last year banned the purchase of crumb rubber infill. If you're not familiar with Montgomery County, it houses almost all the federal research facilities, NIST, Walter Reed, CDC, and NIH. And also that county has the highest concentration of those, because of those labs, of PhDs in the United States. So I would take the lead from Montgomery County and not move forward with using crumb rubber. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frankel. Next is Ms. Hackett.
Thank you. Can you hear? Is that on? Okay. Hello? Better?
Got it.
Kind of?
No.
Okay.
Just gotta keep it close.
Okay. When I sat down to think about what I would want to convey to you tonight, many different arguments, quotes, and data points flew through my mind. There is the acute health and safety concern brought up to me by a fellow EPS parent and physician that the rate of skin abrasions due to contact with the turf was 2 to 3-fold higher for players playing on artificial turf, which then leaves children at higher risk for skin infections. There is the additional acute safety concern of heat-related illness being higher for athletes playing on turf due to surface temperatures reaching upwards of 200 degrees on a hot day. There's the alarming safety concern that the vendor that Edina is working with to provide this turf has just testified in front of a Maryland legislative body that their products contain lead. There's the long-term safety concern of exposing our children to the veritable witch's brew of toxic substances in crumb rubber, as described by Gharbi Benoit, PhD, Yale Professor of Environmental Chemistry and Engineering and lead investigator of the recent Yale University analysis of crumb rubber infill. There is the environmental concern that this toxic brew could off-gas into our air and leach into our ground here in Edina. There is the financial concern that we are making a multi-million-dollar commitment to a substance that the federal government is studying right now because the existing studies do not comprehensively evaluate the concerns about health risks from exposure to tire crumb. And finally, there is my very personal concern that despite the fact that the federal government has stated that the studies to date are inconclusive, and despite the fact that many people in your community have a litany of unanswered questions about this material and this enormous monetary investment, EPS and the school board have stated that they feel comfortable moving forward with artificial turf with crumb rubber. If you vote to invest $1.7 million of Edina taxpayer money on this material tonight and put in these fields, they will be the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th field of their kind of in Edina. Do we really need 8 artificial turf fields with crumb rubber in Edina? Do we really need them immediately? I see no plausible argument as to why we cannot pause for 8 months and wait for the federal study results. You have almost 500 of your constituents that have asked you to do so, and you have upwards of 8,000 smaller constituents that are trusting you to leave no stone unturned in protecting their health and well-being that includes the prudent investment of their educational funds. They should always be our number one concern, and in the end, safeguarding their future health and educational path are the only arguments that matter. Please pause and allow yourself and this community the time to rethink this. Taking the prudent approach will harm no one. I will leave you with a quote from Dr. Philip Landrigan, Dean of Global Health at Mount Sinai Medical Center. Children go to playgrounds almost daily, and gifted athletes are on the soccer field almost every day. That sort of cumulative exposure results in a buildup in their body of these toxic chemicals and can result in a buildup of cellular damage that's caused by these chemicals. And that can then result in disease years or decades later. Little children should not be put in a situation where they're forced to be in intimate contact with carcinogenic chemicals. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hackett. Next is Ms. Grove.
Hello, I'm Jenna Grove. I'm here representing Clean Water Action. We represent over 50,000 Minnesotans, with over 700 of them being Edina residents. As we can see here tonight, there is some serious concern with the potential health effects because of the toxic chemicals contained in these recycled waste tires. The Yale study that was previously mentioned found over 90 chemicals in 14 different samples tested, with half of them never being tested for human health effects. Someone also spoke to the CPSC and the EPA study that's going to be coming out later this year. The chair of the CPSC recently spoke before Congress and said that he does not stand by his statement from 2008 that this is a safe product for children to play on. Aside from that, I think it's just important to point out that if this is not something that is a necessity immediately, to at least wait to find what kind of data comes out of these studies that are being done, not only by the EPA, but also there's a $3 million study being done by the state of California. And before we expose our children to this type of material further, it's just important to make sure that the public gets what they deserve, which is some transparent information on whether this is actually safe or not.
Thank you, Ms. Grove. Next is Ms. Barlas.
Can you hear me? Okay. I want to thank each of you for the opportunity to speak tonight, and I also want to thank you for your service. I know there's a lot of feedback that you're receiving, and I know personally from working on committees how hard it is to do what you feel such a hard job, and then all of a sudden, you know, you can't please everybody. But I think what's significant tonight is just the volume of concern that we'd like to express. To borrow a sports term, the school board seems to be employing a hurry-up offense, not wanting to pause and collect input from the community. Edina citizens demand leaders who are trusted, thoughtful stewards of our health, safety, and finances. The information provided by the school board to the public about costs is alarmingly incomplete. These costs, absent from your projections, paint a much more accurate picture of the true financial burden required of synthetic turf. And what of contingency plans? As of the last school board meeting, the board refuses to wait a few months for the release of the Federal Research Action Plan, due late 2016. Why would we make such a huge capital investment when research is still pending? Field Turf, as mentioned, has admitted in court that their product contains lead. Who in Edina will monitor the safety of the fields the board plans to install using this same company? And significantly, who will pay for this testing? There's not enough time to list all the other costs absent from your projections, but I'll start. Additional replacement infill, required irrigation because of heat generated by the rubber, chemical disinfectants, sprays to reduce static cling and odors, drainage repair and maintenance, erasing and replacing temporary lines, removing organic matter accumulation, such as food dropped by athletes, Gatorade, which causes mold, and even and up to including bodily fluids such as vomit, which is not unheard of on a sports field. A replacement turf cost. These fields say they'll last 8 to 10 years. Where will those millions of dollars come from when that time is up? Disposal costs. Because of the material, the crumb rubber material, it is deemed unfit for landfill, but okay for our children. This requires special removal costs and fees. And what of the warranty? All across the United States, towns and schools that have replaced their grass fields with artificial turf are finding out the hard way that the plastic stuff doesn't always last as long as advertised. This is known as premature failure. How will you come back to the community saying, oops, when we're asked to fight field turf to replace things, as mentioned before, that they'll sometimes ask you to pay upcharges on, refuse to adhere to the warranty and whatnot? And speaking of the warranty, what are the conditions? How do we know we will be even, field turf will even meet the warranty? Does the warranty cover all aspects of the artificial field soil base, preparation, base materials, turf materials? What level of technical training must be supplied to the maintenance crew in order to properly maintain the area and warranty conditions? What are the recommended processes to address each of the following, such as damage caused by fire? These playgrounds are highly combustible. There's an article in New Jersey where an 11-year-old set fire to the entire playground. Vandalism, once teenagers hear about it, is rampant among many of these fields. What about discoloration in areas caused by wear pattern differences, other physical weather-relating damage? Rains have known to flood and warp these fields, and they've come undone. The list goes on, and I think you get the idea. Lots of topics are going to be mentioned tonight. I just urge you and frankly beg of you to take the community input to heart. Hold off until we get the national survey done, and let us form a task force of community members who are now becoming more and more involved and more well-versed in the material to help you come up with a solution. Because I acknowledge there is no easy answer to this. We love our activities, We love our sports, and we want our children all to have those opportunities. Let us help you find a solution that makes everybody happy and healthy. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Ms. Seaman.
Hello, I'm Liz Seaman. I'm an Edina resident with children aged 8, 6, and 1. I've got one child who plays sports on crumb rubber, turf. I've got a husband who coaches on it. I've got a middle child who won't stop doing cartwheels on it while we're watching her brother. And I've got a 1-year-old who finds it all over the house and who I pray to God isn't eating it. This is my reality. I'm here to ask why you are so insistent on moving forward with crumb rubber in full. Who exactly is for crumb rubber? Where is the push for crumb rubber that I don't know about? What I do know about are the many impassioned parents out here in Edina who are most definitely against it and who are advocating on behalf of their precious children that you don't seem to be listening to. From what I've gathered, you say your reasons for supporting the crumb rubber are that it's cost effective, that the vast majority of turf fields are filled with crumb rubber, and that the studies regarding its safety are inconclusive. The last time I checked, doing anything because it's cheaper and because everyone else is doing it are not good enough reasons to expose my children to this junk. You say that the studies on long-term health effects are inconclusive. However, I will tell you what is not inconclusive, and that's the 96 chemicals identified in crumb rubber, including known carcinogens, which according to the EPA, as you know, include among other hazardous chemicals, mercury, lead, benzene, and arsenic. Pound for pound, our children have greater exposure to environmental toxins than adults. Their organs are still developing, their bodies are less able to detoxify. It is vital that we shield our children from as many environmental toxins as possible. And yet, you still want to move forward with an opinion, with a product whose safety questions are only based on opinions and anecdotes. Well, if by anecdotes you're referring to the parents of children with cancer or who have died of cancer, then I would be careful not to question the strength or weight of their power, of their anger, or of their fear that they expose their children to crumb rubber, which even the most common sense response is that this doesn't seem right to make kids play on shredded tires that are even too toxic for landfills. When I shared on social media that my community was moving forward with crumb rubber fields, I had a number of friends across the country contact me personally and say, wow, I can't believe you guys are laying this stuff down. In one case, they noted that their town, Redwood City, California, had just spent $4 million ripping it up and replacing it with a non-toxic infill. They said to me, I'm so sorry. Well, I'm sorry too, and I'm embarrassed. This is not progress, and this is not the Edina I grew up in, and it's not the Edina I know and love. Are you sure, are you absolutely sure that my children will be safe? I would argue the answer is no, but mostly I would argue that you can't say yes. Please, please make a better decision here for my children, for all the children that play on these fields with a frequency that is only increasing. Please follow the lead of so many other communities, including the Mounds View District, who said, and I quote, there's been a number of conversations regarding crumb rubber. There are studies that will say crumb rubber is perfectly safe and others that have concerns along with them. We as a community decided to take ourselves out of that conversation and go with a different product. I ask that you do the same, or at the very least, hold off on this decision. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next is Mr. Seaman.
I'm not going to speak in such a polished manner to the ladies and the gentleman who spoke earlier. I'm just hearing this really for the first time. So I'm a coach. I'm a coach in the lacrosse program right now. We can't move fast enough. I sit on the board of the lacrosse program also. We can't move fast enough to have a formal motion. You know the formal processes we have to go through. So I don't have a done. I couldn't come up here and speak, and that's forthcoming. And we're talking in terms of time right now. I just can't move fast enough. So that's disappointing. If I had another week, might be speaking on behalf of the program, but I can't do that right now. But I'm just thinking logically in terms of liability, first of all. I mean, everyone's telling a really compelling story right now about why crumb rubber is so very toxic and all the issues associated with it. I'm very fearful over the course of time. You get sick kids. You have someone show up with cancer that's going to come back to bite you when we go through the minutes of this exact meeting, and you get a chance to hear all these amazing facts that speak to the problems associated with it. I asked myself the very logical question as a father: would I let my kids go crawl on a pile of tires in Edina? We would never have a pile of tires in Edina. because we're educated people. We think pragmatically. There's so many different reasons why that would be the case. We would never let that happen. So what crumb rubber is in this case, you're grinding it up and letting kids roll around on it. It's completely illogical to me. And I ask you to think from that perspective. Wait a little longer. I'm going to sound like Donald Trump right now, but I'm concerned about the deal that you've cut with this company, with Field Turf. What's the reason? Why is it so important that you go so quickly? There are existing fields in town. You guys can answer after the fact if that's the case, but why do we have to move so quickly? I just question if there's some type of penalty involved. Is the penalty worth paying to think more about what the liability may be down the line and what the health ramifications would be of the situation? I'm just interested to hear at some point what the deal was, what's forcing us to move so very quickly rather than do the intelligent thing and wait until we know more. It seems like that information is forthcoming. We're talking about several months. We're not talking about years. We have fields that work, and we're waiting for more information that I think is going to help you to make a better decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is Mr. Wary here? Dan Wary?
Thank you, Board, for hearing this pretty contentious matter. And I also appreciate the openness of Rick Dawson and Randy Meyer to hear my comments and at least help try to inform me on what was taking place. Last week, the schedules didn't work out. I was in contact with their admin, so thank you for at least trying to meet with me. However, on the opposite side of the coin, I feel as open as you are to try to meet with us. I don't feel that it's reciprocal in the sense that I don't feel you're really listening to what your community and your constituents are really trying to say. You're open on one end, but I think you're closed on the other end. Here, we have probably the most educated professionals, this CDC, EPA, Consumer Protection Agencies, studying this issue, and I don't think they just decided to do it because they had nothing better to do. I think it's a real issue. It's affecting others throughout the country. And, of course, it was initiated by the government. The government, a couple of senators reached out. President Obama decided, hey, let's look into this further. It's an opportunity to listen to what the most current and real-time information on this issue is. Just like the previous gentleman said, it's odd to me why we can't wait. It's almost as if we've already signed a contract and already into a transaction that we can't get out of, because it doesn't seem like we're really in a situation with a meeting of the minds and trying to work together and making a good long-term decision. So it's just conspicuous on why this is taking place. It seems like there's a lot of pressure to make this move, and it feels awkward. So to bring our illustrious Republican candidate back into the circumstances, maybe the deal has already been cut, I don't know. There are other alternatives. I know you've looked at them. I'm not sure how thoroughly. Maybe they're not the best alternatives, but maybe they're better than this alternative. I know ground-up Nike soles are being used in some areas. I'm not sure what the health effects are on those. I'd probably rather have Nike soles versus tires and those potential chemicals. Just my own personal thought, as well as my kids. I sat in the audience. I'm trying to put together some thoughts here, and it was cute to hear the kids in the background, and some of the kids here I know from preschool and elementary school, and those are our constituents too. So I think we owe it to them for their health considerations to take it into consideration. Why? It just seems to me we can wait and look for other alternatives. So, of course, I'll leave you with the saying, hindsight is 20/20. We actually have the opportunity to benefit from hindsight by taking the time to really think this through, and not for somebody to criticize us for not taking the time to wait. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Last person is Ms. Seymour. You're good? Thank you. could have had you walk us through the agenda to begin with. It's short. Maybe you want to just fly through it real quick?
Yep, so it's a special meeting tonight, so we're just taking action on issues and resolutions related to our construction. First, the four-field turf project. Talk to that, and then we have a few additions to the high school, additions, renovations, some contracts that were not finalized at our last board meeting, we're now finalizing, and then we have a joint powers agreement between the city and Countryside, and the school district at Countryside Elementary. Those were all reviewed by the Facilities Committee, and we can go forward with that. And that would pretty much wrap up the day. We have maybe some discussion at the end of the board meeting.
So the first action item is to approve the contract with Field Turf that we've just heard discussion on. Could I get a motion to approve the contract with Field Turf USA for the four-field turf project?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All right. Margot, can you just walk us, so at the last meeting, you gave a relatively detailed background to this. If you can just walk us through what this contract is, be great.
I'd be happy to. Good evening. Attached in your board materials is the four-field project. The vendor is combining a couple projects by location and the National Joint Powers Alliance pricing. What that is sometimes we do cooperative purchasing with other districts or state contract pricing. This is a national pricing. So what that means is the bid process has already taken place through this national firm, and we get good pricing for that. And in it is also the specifications nationally, and then in addition to that, with our civil engineer, AJA, additional specifications in terms of the turf, warranty, testing requirements, training, cleaning, because you do need to clean it, performance, feel, safety, all of those types of things have been considered and is as part of the proposal process. The details are reflected in your board materials in terms of cost. Also included in there, we did ask for some additional language. We separated the project out into two components, the 2016 fields and the 2017 fields. And the additional language relates to the 2017 field, that the district would have the option to terminate if information came forward. We would have the option to terminate between now and April 30th, 2017. And that additional language was added, and Field Turf has agreed to that.
So, brought to my attention that there was some additional information that was added, which was walked in. Can I get a motion to substitute in the resolution to approve the contract in lieu of the one that was already on board book?
So moved.
Second.
And I take it your discussion is no different on the, because it's the same exact motion.
I
it's
jumped
just
ahead to that discussion.
So,
So, Margaret, can you just explain what's different? Is it just the background, or is the motion different as well?
Oh, the motion is the same. And Facilities Committee, our civil engineers, construction managers, architect firm, we've all been working on this, and certainly we've been, as we've talked about before, been visiting about this since prior to the calendar year. The motion, again, has not changed. I just provided additional background as we continue to work on that one specific piece of language where there's the option to terminate by for the 2017 project by April 30th, 2017. No other changes.
are there any questions from anybody?
Well, in the original packet that the public would have been able to see, none of the stuff on the, let's see, the last page, 2 pages, the exclusions, notes, exclusions and notes were not in the original packet. So that is all new verbiage that wasn't online.
There's
The
copies
original
in the
packet
back.
just had pricing.
There's copies in the back of the room.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any other questions?
Margot, can you speak to
the timing of this project. We've had, some questions as to why this is moving ahead now, although this is a big difference that we have the option to terminate on the uncompleted projects prior to 2017 if information warrants it. But how does this fit with our overall scope of work and the timing of the installation of these fields? It certainly is, and Chad is here and probably can speak more in detail, and Vaughn and Eric, but it all incorporates into the timing of all of our construction projects. And when we need fields available to be used, we did approve at our last meeting the bid for the site work to prepare the site for the turf replacement. This is the request for approval of the actual turf itself, but we have already approved preparing the site. And if you need a more detailed answer in terms of impact to schedule, I would refer to one of my peers here.
Well, I think the question that the constituents are asking has more to do with explaining why we're at this point where we're, the administration has asked the board to move forward on this, kind of giving the background of, that we were talking about this in the fall of 2014 when we were working through the referendum recommendations. If you could give some of that background about the timing and why we're where we're at. Does that make sense?
I'm not sure I completely understand your question.
I think the point is there have been several folks who have raised a concern tonight that we're rushing to this. And in fact, there's quite a long history of explicitly considering what's best for the fields.
The timing is in relative to when they decided to do the study. And that was just in February. That's
Okay.
the issue of timing.
And that's not correct. There was a subcommittee of the Facilities Committee that began addressing this in 2015. And if you could give some explanation of the timing of our looking at crumb rubber and alternative processes, I think that would be helpful, just a chronology.
Okay. We began in the fall of 2015 with Facilities Committee taking a look at the various types of turf available, brought various types of information over multiple Facilities Committee. There was a sub-task force through the Facilities Committee directed to do other research other school districts, different options, and come back with a recommendation. And then we had several discussions at the board work session level. So over the course of, again, the fall of 2015 through now, this has been a process through the committee level, task force level, and full board level. So it hasn't just occurred in the last 2 to 4 weeks. It has been an ongoing discussion that has, and previous to that, more detailed discussion, we have been discussing field space in general. It's been part of the Facility Advisory Task Force that assisted with the bond referendum and what would be included. There was, even prior to that, 2 years prior to that, there was the original Facilities Advisory Task Force that recognized the need for additional field space. And even prior to that, a couple years prior to that, were individual community members coming forward with funding plans saying we need additional, and in that particular example, additional turf fields because the natural grass fields are not keeping up and we need additional space. So just in general, the conversation around the need for fields has been going on for years, as long as I can remember here in my tenure here.
So I think I have a continued of Regina's question is, why couldn't we wait? So what is it in terms of our construction guidelines, or, in terms of our moving forward with all our projects that make this a set domino that needs to happen before what? I guess that's my question.
Chad and Vaughn. Part of it, one thing, and as Chad and Vaughn are getting up to the table here, one is that all of this is part of the overall master plan for all of the constructions, and so one piece needs to be done before another, particularly at the high school, and also sensitivity to having the fields available. But Vaughn and Chad?
I'll start from an overall master planning standpoint.
So just, Vaughn, you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry, Vaughn Dirks with Wold Architects and Engineers. In 2009 and 2010, there were task forces that studied the need for fields in the district. As part of the expansion plans, as you're aware, you have very limited real estate around any of your school buildings, in particular around the high school. Currently, there are a number of grass fields that athletes play on that are in poor condition. These are also the location where the addition to the high school is taking place. These will come offline immediately starting this summer. So we'll be expanding out in the northwest portion of the site, which will take that field offline. We'll also be expanding out to the east, which will take those fields offline. So that'll add continued pressure to your programs. And so just from a timing standpoint and having enough available space, that's one of the issues. The other one is in product manufacture and the prep work in order to be able to bring those fields online as the construction proceeds. That's an overall approach. Chad, maybe you have more specifics in terms of construction.
No, I think that's a good synopsis of that. The two fields and the high school is losing, a lot of that capacity, and the preparation work at the community center site really is what's going to take even more traffic than what's there, and so getting those fields up and ready to take that added capacity even more so than it will normally get for that year in between is kind of the reason for the phasing of getting some work done first, and then the high school site will follow in 17.
So what does that mean for what, I don't know if you can even answer this, but what is the impact on our sports programs, both in the district and in the community programs, if we were to not move forward? In terms of what would be delayed, or would things need to be canceled?
It's a net loss of fields, as well as no synthetic turf to play on from a durability standpoint to expand practice times.
So the first projects that move forward are the east side of the campus, where we are now with Coleman Fields being replaced, and then McCarthy Field being an added turf field, correct?
Correct.
And then what could potentially be delayed if there are study results that show that it is warranted would be the west side of the campus at no financial loss on moving forward for that portion.
Correct.
So part of it is replacement of what we've been using for 12 years.
Correct. The existing Coleman Field is in need of replacement from the time it was installed.
But it did fulfill the expected useful life for the amount of use.
Yes.
So it didn't underperform from what was expected with that particular installation. Well and beyond.
Well, beyond, and also the field at the high school is turf, and that was installed at the same time, and we're going to try to get a few more years out of that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That was installed in 2004, so it's at 12 years.
Can, I don't know if either of you gentlemen can answer this. Some of the constituents have mentioned that there was admission to lead being still in some of the crumb rubber. Do you know if that is what is the current product, or is that based on product, that were put in previously?
To the best of my knowledge, the product does not contain lead at this time. I believe the date referenced at that point was 2009. I'd have to look into it. So no, to the best of my knowledge, no.
The vendor will meet federal guidelines.
And then I guess my other question is around the vendor that we're choosing. There have been, and I've read, this information that's been sent to us that there have been lawsuits against this particular firm. Do we have any guarantees or different things that we're looking for with this vendor? And do we have concerns that we should be looking at other vendors outside of this one?
My understanding is Field Turf is the vendor from 12 years ago also, and the district has had good performance, as just was discussed. With any vendor, you can have an issue, but we also have language in terms of the specifications and 8-year warranty on the product, and would certainly hold the vendor accountable.
Which leads to my next question. The financial concern is always one that worries me. And so I'm wondering if there were results from the EPA or one of the other government entities that would say that this is not safe and we have to remove it, will Field Turf or will there be any kind of recourse for us in terms of it's at their expense that the crumb rubber is removed and replaced with something that is safe to protect us financially from the burden of having to replace this if it is deemed unsafe?
So we did pose that question to them. That was not something they were willing to put in agreement. They did put the termination agreed to the termination language, and we were able to negotiate on that, certainly. My understanding is with the industry in general is that the industry in general is not agreeing to commit to requirements that aren't out there yet. They will commit to requirements that they know that are in laws that are in place right now, is my understanding. If something were to come out in the future, all of that depends on the language and how it comes out, and we've experienced that in other areas over the course of time. And sometimes there's a phase-in process. Sometimes there's funding to assist with replacements. Sometimes it's holding vendors accountable. Sometimes it's holding the business or the public entity accountable for the replacement, or a combination of all of the above. And we don't know what that'll look like. I've seen a variety of when there's different types of quality changes. We have health and safety funding. Sometimes we are able to get reimbursement for replacement of something if it falls under that. Whether that definition would be expanded because of results from the EPA, I don't know that. Those are all unknowns that we can't commit to wouldn't know at this time, but certainly would explore those options. And I share your concern about finances, Sarah. I appreciate that.
We've occasionally heard stories about communities that ripped up their fields. We heard one tonight about Redwood City, California, but they actually went through the life of their field, like we've gone through here with the one we've had 12 years, and now we're getting something new. And then they went to the one that required doubling the tax amount you require or having the number of fields you have. Have you heard of any city anywhere in America that actually, before the life of their field was done, chose to go in and rip it up, as we've been seeing people post online, or is that a misunderstanding?
I'm not sure I'd be able to answer that.
I don't know of anybody any other district off the top of my head, but I'm not saying there isn't. So, but I don't know of any.
Okay.
That have.
Other questions?
Can you, I've heard and read something about sprays and disinfectants. Can you speak to that at all on the turf to keep it clean, and are there safety concerns around that?
Again, I'm not the expert in the turf side, but there's a difference between indoor turf and exterior turf, and the indoor turf, which is not the case we have here, has a different level of pieces because it doesn't have the rain from outside, it doesn't have the UV rays from the sun, and those are two pieces that are different. So to my knowledge, there's not chemicals that are put on for that on exterior turf.
And
Likewise, I don't know if you have the background on the other options for infill. I know I've read a lot of articles regarding potentials for cork and corn husk. My understanding from some of those is there's a potential risk for inhalants that can cause respiratory illnesses, and that there may be a need for other types of bacteria and mold control on those products. Is there any information available that could give us some conclusive background about the risk of the alternative infills?
Again, there's likely people starting to study that. They're relatively newer in terms of how they're performing. I know that there's some issues in terms of how they deal with rain and other items, but I'm not sure that we have the information tonight to be able to answer that question for you.
And I've just asked Eric Hamilton here, who can speak to how we've maintained our current synthetic turf fields with the crumb rubber, so he can speak to that.
Yeah, we currently have 2 turf fields that we maintain for numerous years. As far as the fluids that you're talking about, rain does a tremendous number. The sun does a tremendous number with UV. We do have equipment that we currently maintain the field with, whether it's fluff it up, whether it's clean it off, and we would continue those practices with the future field.
Another thing I'd point out is that we heard tonight that the slate is clean, that there are no studies anymore, and that seems false to me. There are a lot of studies looking at this sort of material from a lot of different angles. Inhalation was a major fear in the 90s and early aughts, and the studies looked at that numerously and found no correlation, no linkage between inhalation and any of the fears that were brought up. Now, what some people in our audience have said, I think, is more accurate, that there are lingering gaps in what has been studied, and that is what is moving forward. California is looking to close one of those gaps in knowledge. The EPA and some other groups are looking at the overall comprehensive features, trying to close it so that they can say there are 0 things left to even wonder about. But the slate's not clean. It is heavily loaded on the side of safety from a lot of different angles, with a couple of angles left to research. Is that an accurate characterization from what everybody else has understood and read?
That is my understanding from having reviewed the studies and looked at the literature very carefully over the last 6 months and continuing to update my knowledge of it through this evening.
For my own part, what I appreciate is the studies that I've been able to do, reviewing the information shared by the community, for which I'm grateful. I do want to acknowledge our appreciation for the respectful dialogue, that this is important. It's an important part of the process, and I expect that this will be ongoing, because until we have more information from the studies and we get to 2017, we won't have made a final decision. We still, and I'm very grateful for that opportunity for continued review before the installation of the West Campus fields. There are a lot of unknowns that I haven't been able to answer regarding any of the other products. I know from our studies over the past 12 years that grass is not an option in Edina for our current activities on site, that it creates a safety risk, and we have a limitation with it. What I would like to have in terms of information, and I recognize it's not available, is conclusive information regarding the safety of any other alternative. So, not an expert in the field, have read a great deal, will continue to read, appreciate our own experience with having turf on the Edina site for some experience in that regard, but do welcome the opportunity to continue to move forward and monitor the study, because it is timely and important that the EPA continue to research this product.
Couple of quick questions. The 1.7 million is not the number that we're necessarily setting in stone tonight, correct? It's a portion of that is what is being spent on the East Campus, and that would get started this summer.
Correct, because we do have the option to terminate. However, what we are doing, which is beneficial, is we're confirming the pricing for even the 2017 product. So if there's a pricing change and we continue to move forward, this is the price for the 2017 project.
So we're locking in the price.
Yes.
And then we're hedging our risk a little bit in the
Mhm.
sense that in the event the EPA comes out with something in December or January or up to, I think, April, we can cancel the West Campus fields at no
Correct.
cost.
Right.
Okay. And the questions that have been raised tonight are very similar to ones we've heard for the last 4 weeks. I take it that the Facilities Committee is still in favor of this proposal. And I'm not sure where to direct that question to.
That is correct.
Absolutely.
And I understand that there's no conclusive study. The vendor is representing to us that this product is safe. Is that correct?
Yes. It meets all requirements. They are representing, or they wouldn't put it meets all the requirements, federal requirements, so that's what they are representing, yes.
Are there other questions? Any comments before we vote?
I would just briefly, first, my views on this are, I think, known to the audience, and I know they disappoint you, but I do understand the passion that you've brought to this. I have children who use these fields. I have not taken any of your concerns lightly and have been living with this decision for 6 months. Ultimately, though, the decision has to be made, in my mind, based on science rather than anecdote. And the science has been clear based on all of the studies. There is no study showing a link between crumb rubber and cancer, which was the original concern that launched the opposition to this field. Since then, we've launched on other concerns, all of which I think we've considered carefully and met. I do appreciate your efforts. I wish I could have heard something tonight that would have made the decision easier for me, but I didn't. I agree it is a hard decision. But first, I want to thank you because we have negotiated a better agreement with this company than we would have, but for your activity, and that's appreciated. Second, because no one was here speaking to it, I do feel a need to mention that the folks who have written and talked to us and stopped in support of these fields have not really had their voice heard, but there is in fact tremendous support among the coaches and players and families that use these fields. They provide activity outlets for sports, including the less organized sports, the non-varsity sports, like ultimate frisbee that otherwise get shortchanged on fields. And there is an equal amount of passion among those coaches and players that this is the right way to go. And those are constituent voices that deserve to be heard. Also, particularly given my personal consideration of the evidence and my conclusion that there is no evidence to support a linkage between crumb rubber and ill health effects. So I just want to be clear on the record for the reasons for my vote and to make sure that although you disagree with it, it was certainly not a vote that was being taken lightly.
I have a comment before you vote, and I insist upon it.
So you don't.
Respectfully, you realize that the moment that you agree to this, even though you had the option to get out, they start site work, you know exactly where it's going to end up. You're going to move forward anyway, so you negotiated this right to get out of the deal, but once site work starts, you're going to be short fields, you're going to run out of options. So you negotiated this.
All right, thank you very much.
No value.
Thank you very much. So I'll also note that the decision that we're making tonight is one that does weigh heavily on me. I mean, it's one that, as I try to weigh what the potential risks are, and they can only be listed as potential risks at this point because there have been studies done. The studies don't create a link. And I think, as Amir pointed out, there are some studies that have eliminated certain links already, and I haven't heard evidence to the contrary as to that. We do, as a district, need the fields, and whatever people may say about whether the kids are too active, I think that having kids being active is positive, and it is driven by our community and the request for these fields. I do take some consolation with the fact that we're going to have an opportunity in the event the EPA actually comes to a resolution prior to April that we can move forward and not go forward on the west side campus. But I think ultimately what I hear from the Facilities Committee, what I hear from Vaughn and Kraus, we need to move forward. Any other comments before we vote?
Yeah, I think it's important, the comment about lead. There have been some turf fields that have lead chromate. This is very different than lead carbonate, which is the material formerly found in lead-based paints. So I think it's important to understand what really is the lead you're talking about and what's the availability of that from within the fibers. But it's lead carbonate. That's very different. Lead chromate is what's in the, has been in some turf fields. That's very different than lead carbonate, which is the material that's available in lead paints. I think it's important to note that. Also, as a point of order, we need to vote to approve the amendment to insert the new language into this motion before we vote on the motion itself.
I was just going to add that I concur with my colleagues on the heaviness of this issue. I've spent lots of time, as we should, as elected officials, reading everything that our constituents have sent us, also what the administration has provided us, and our vendors. And you know, I don't take this lightly, and I've been particularly worried, you know, financially, because I do believe that if the EPA makes their decision, that I'm not convinced that the federal government will necessarily fund this mandate if they would put a mandate down that we have to do this, because as board, we deal with lots of unfunded mandates. So I do have strong financial concerns around this, and also, of course, the concerns of our community, because it's parents who care about their children and worry about their future. And it is hard as a board to just say, well, there's no proof, and you know, we're okay with that. I don't think any of us look at our job that way or look at your concerns that way. This has been, weighing on us, and I can only speak for myself, but weighing on me heavily, this vote tonight and the decision that we're making for the children of our community. With that said, I will relinquish.
And I just also thank you to the community. We really do appreciate the dialogue. I appreciate it. It also weighs heavily. I recognize that we will continue to study this topic, but that my vote is based on the fact that I don't have evidence for a safer alternative. I also recognize that there's a need to continue to move forward to provide fields for students, but that we will continue to study that, and I welcome the opportunity to do that together.
So the current motion is to substitute the walked-in motion to approve the contract. Is there any discussion on that? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion to amend to bring in the walked-in the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so that passed. We've already had discussion on that particular motion. Are there any other questions or discussion on the motion that is now before the board, which is the walked-in motion to approve a contract with Field Turf USA for the 4-field turf project? Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion carried. Next item on the agenda is the Edina High School additions and renovations, and I believe we have a walked-in amendment to that also. Can I get a motion to substitute the walked-in motion for the one that was already out?
So moved.
Any discussion on substituting the walked-in motion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we are now on to a presentation on the walked-in motion, which is to approve contract as per the attached documents from Kraus Anderson Construction.
As I presented with the overall high school bids, or we presented, at that time, there were several that we were holding on to continue to work with the vendor and work out some of the details, because that was a really, if you recall, a quick turnaround time and a lot of bids incorporated under the high school umbrella. And these three are the remaining ones for the high school. One, we are rejecting the bids, and the other two are recommending approval. And I'll ask Chad to provide a little bit more detail there, and either of us can answer any questions that you have.
Yeah, this was just the last three categories, and we just had to do a little more legwork on setting up some meetings and chasing down work scope 10A. There was another bidder that had a lower price, but it was not the specified material. It was a voluntary alternate price. So we just had to do a little better research, and there was a reason it wasn't in the specifications. It didn't meet what we were after, and so we're just looking to accept the price for the lowest responsible bidder in that category. And then in 12C in the bleachers, we just needed to do a little legwork to make sure that we were getting the right product before we recommended award, and have went through that process, and now we're recommending award for both those. And in the final cleaning category, we're looking at just rejecting bids and going back out for quotes and or rebids in that section. And that will not delay that's at the tail end of the project. We got a little bit this summer, but that's pretty much the tail end, so we've got time to deal with that, make sure we got the right company on board. So,
Any questions or discussion? All those, did you have something? Oh. All those in favor of approving the contracts as per the attached document from Kraus Anderson for the Edina High School addition and renovation, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passed.
Thank you, Chad.
Hearing none. The next action item is the joint powers agreement with the City of Edina. Can I get a motion to approve the joint powers agreement?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Margot, are you on presentation on that one?
Yes. And Eric is also here to assist in it. This is part of the Tracy Avenue project in terms of the city coming through and doing the other half of Tracy this year. While they're doing that work, and not only to the street but to the sidewalk areas there, this Joint Powers provides an opportunity where we can extend a sidewalk where now we only have stairs down to Countryside from Tracy for easier access, handicapped accessibility, and access for students and families, community members to the site versus stairs. Eric, do you have anything to add to that?
If you remember last year, you approved a sidewalk on the other side of the building. This is just another opportunity because the city's working on this side. It allows us to eliminate a stairs, which in the wintertime, the custodian has to clean off the stairs every single day. We can broom it off. It's a much safer access if you're walking on the sidewalk, whether you're handicapped in a wheelchair or you're walking with your kids in strollers. It's much easier access to the site. It's just it's been a real nice thing to do on that site. The custodian appreciates it. I think Karen is all for it. We've talked several times, and it's been a real benefit to the site and hopefully to the constituents.
I had trouble with the drawings. Is this on the front, or I should say, is this on the Tracy side of the building?
Yes.
Yes.
And so that's the little staircase that comes off of there. Okay. So we'll get rid of that and put in this sidewalk rather.
The stairs will stay. We're not touching them, just
Oh,
like the other
okay.
side. We didn't touch anything. It still will be accessible. In the wintertime, we close it, and we don't shovel the
Okay.
stairs. But summertime, you can use either access.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
A couple questions, since we saw this in facilities. Is there scheduled to be a crosswalk right where this is going to hit the street?
Yes. There will be a crosswalk at Tracy at that point, the city.
Okay, there's
So
a
adding a
there's a significant hill there. Do you know if this has been reviewed and approved at the city level or gone through Transportation Commission? Because I drove this the other day and it looks terribly dangerous.
Yep. Worked with Chad Milner with the city. On their plan, it lays out that there will be a crosswalk at that point.
Okay, that's very dangerous, in my opinion. Will the sidewalk be extending down to the southern end of our property? It doesn't seem to appear that way on the map.
The southern end, no, it curves in and ties into the street. at the bottom of that hill that you're referring to on the
So,
south
so
side.
there's no extension of the sidewalk at all on our property? We won't have a sidewalk the full length of our property?
On the other side of this, Tracy, there's a sidewalk currently, and we're going to tie into that one.
I wouldn't. I object to this just because of that sidewalk being there. I don't think the Transportation Commission has reviewed that. I just have some serious safety concerns.
Sure.
With kids coming across right there, there's no stop sign, and it's a hill, and it's coming from that funny crosswalk.
I know that we're going to have a crossing guard at that point that the principal will have to work with. But the intent is accessibility on that site. That's really the goal.
I was hoping they'd put a sidewalk down the west side so they could cross at Highlands, at least where there is an intersection or potentially a stop sign or something. But it seems like a safety issue to me. Because it's a steep drop-off right there.
So is this something that needs approval today?
Not necessarily.
I mean, in the past, when these questions have come up,
Sure.
we've tabled it to get further information before we approve it, but I don't want to suggest that unless.
This isn't urgent in any fashion. If you have reservations or concerns, certainly not. I can go back and review one more time with the city just to verify where the sidewalks will and won't be. I know they've gone through their process of their committees as far as review of sidewalks, but this is by no means urgent on my side and at all.
I just looked at I didn't believe it was that much of a drop, but when you pull up to Countryside and Tracy, between there and the intersection, it's a big, big hill, and I'm just concerned even putting a crosswalk person out there. It seems like a dangerous spot. So I just want to make sure they've thought this through, and that also that their Transportation Commission has reviewed this, because it just seems like a big change. I would very much prefer a sidewalk on the west side so these kids are able to cross someplace away from that big hill.
I was going to add that.
Just table it and review it.
So do you want to bring a motion to table it, Randy?
So moved.
Do you have a question, Sarah, before?
No, I was just going to say, I know Randy's stressing concern around the sidewalk not linking up with it, and it is true on that side, the sidewalk kind of dead ends and would not come down to where they're proposing. Although I'm wondering if the city, when you go back to them with our questions, if they would be amenable to extending the.
I'll verify the west side sidewalk.
Yeah.
So we have
It's not much of an extension that they would have to make to bring it to Countryside.
So we have a motion to table. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of tabling, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. That third action item is tabled. And we are now on to reports and discussions.
I would just, excuse me. So the board meets in work session next Monday. Our focus will be on, again, just kind of making our progress with the construction plans as we continue to look at the rebid process at the elementary and making necessary adjustments in scope, schedule, and spending. We'll also be giving the board an update on our strategic work going forward, especially some of the major initiatives that we'll be acting on over the next 3-4 months as it relates to school start time and end time, which impacts bus schedules, as well as the daily schedule at the elementary, middle, and high schools and how those might function a little bit different. Just asking the board to approve the guidelines for that, but the recommendations for action would not occur till fall 2016, and we'll be focusing on that work next Monday. But moving forward with our hiring process, both at Southview and Highland Elementary, the principalships, and everything else is in motion. It's springs. We have a lot of wind up and wind down going on.
Great. Anybody else have anything they need to add? Otherwise, can I put a motion to adjourn? A second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.